Today, let's have a look at flow maps. In the simplest of terms, this is a type of map that visualizes the movement of something from one point to another. Usually, flow maps have lines of varying thickness depending on the frequency of each flow. For example, if you had points A, B, and C, and you were looking at how many people travel from A to B, or A to C, the thickness of the line would be dependent on how many people make that trip. So if we look at this figure, we can see, just by the thickness of the line, that more people make trips from B to A than from C to A. Today, though, we're going to be looking at a version of this map where instead of the lines changing, we're going to change the size of our symbology. This is because the free public account on ArcGIS Online doesn't give us access to the analysis toolkit that would allow us to create a flow map in the usual manner. As a quick disclaimer, I will not be going into as much depth as I would in my regular tutorials. If you feel like I'm going too fast and need to refresh your knowledge on the basics, I've linked the relevant tutorials in the description below. To figure out what to do, I first need to think about what I want my map to show. In this case, I'd like to show a map of Watford General Hospital's catchment areas to visually demonstrate where their patients are mainly coming from. And you can adapt this idea to your own data by following the same instructions as in this video. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is head over to this magnifying glass icon over here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. From here, I'm going to start typing where I'd like to zoom into the map. So in my case, I'd like to go to Watford General Hospital. Once it comes up, I'll click on it like so. Now, to get it to look like a flow map, we need a starting point to draw the lines from. So let's head over to the right-hand side of the screen and click on this pen icon to open up the sketch menu. By scrolling down, you can see what your current symbol is. Right now, I'm happy with this pin drop icon, so I'm going to stick with it. But I will increase the size of it just a little to make it a bit more visible on my map. Finally, by clicking on the map canvas where I want the icon to be, I can confirm my choice. The next step is adding in those catchment areas that I was talking about before. An easy way to do this is by having a list of postcodes that you'd like to map. Conveniently, I've already done this and added them to this Excel spreadsheet. Here you can see that I've got 4 rows of data and a row for my headings. I have 3 fields or attributes called place, postcode, and people, respectively. The place field stores the names of the places that fall within Watford General Hospital's catchment area. The postcode field does exactly as it says, and it stores postcodes. And the people field stores information about how many people are in that catchment. And this is a type of count data. Please note that these figures are not real, and I've just quickly added in random numbers so that we can have something to work with. Now, the only thing I'm missing are the longitudes and latitudes of these postcodes so that ArcGIS Online can position them on a map. An important tangent if you're working with postcode data is knowing how it's structured. These 2 sticky notes will help us break it down. What you're most likely used to seeing is what we call a full unit postcode, and it's what you give out when you give someone your address. But to get there, we first have to start with the postcode area, which is made up of 1 or 2 letters. The level above this is a district, which adds 1 or 2 numbers to the area. Then the sector adds a space after the district and is made up of the first digit after the space. Lastly, the full unit postcode, the one you're most used to seeing, takes the sector and adds 2 letters after it. So if we go back to our data, we can see that I'm using a postcode district. This is important because the website I'm going to use to get longitudes and latitudes out of my postcode, called gridreferencefinder.com, doesn't accept postcode areas, so I have to make sure I'm working with postcode districts and up. Don't worry, I'll leave a link to this below in case you're interested in accessing it too. But this is why knowing how your data is structured can help you manipulate it better. Anyways, I'm going to highlight these postcodes on Excel and paste them into this website. And then I'm going to click on Convert Postcodes. If you're having issues with this, try and mess with the field separator and see if it makes a difference. Now if I scroll down to the bottom and I click on this text box, I can copy and paste this spatial data back into Excel. It's also important to note that you cannot have two fields with the same name. So I'm going to delete this postcode field. Whilst we're here getting rid of things, only the latitude and longitudinal information are important to us. So these are the only fields I'm going to keep. To add this data into our ArcGIS Online map, I first have to convert this Excel file into a CSV. Even though I'm doing this on a Mac, you can still do this in a very similar way on any other device. My screen recording doesn't quite show you my menu bars at the top of my computer, but quite simply, I'm going to click on File, then on Save As. And then I'm going to change the file format to CSV UTF-8 and click on Save. Now if I go back to my map on ArcGIS Online, and I click on the layers icon over here on the left-hand side of the screen, I can then click on the drop-down icon next to Add. And from this drop-down menu, select Add Layer from File. From here, I can drag and drop or select the CSV from my device, like so. And once the file is done loading, click on Next. All of my display names are good since they don't contain spaces or special characters. And as I've discussed in previous tutorials, ArcGIS Online is really good at selecting the right data types, so I'm going to leave them as is and click on Next to move on. Here I can see that my latitude and longitude fields have been mapped correctly, since longitude matches longitude and latitude matches latitude. So I can happily click on Next here too. From here, I can choose a name and a location for this data to be saved on the online server. Personally, I'm happy with the defaults, so I'm going to finally click on Create and Add to Map. Lovely, my postcode locations have successfully been mapped. Remember, if you can't quite see where your data is, try and have ArcGIS Online automatically zoom to it by heading over to the Layers panel on the left-hand side, and then clicking on the three dots beside your newly added layer, and clicking Zoom to, like so. The next part is adding in lines that make up a flow map. In my case, it's between the catchment areas and Watford General Hospital that we marked earlier with a pin drop icon. First, I'm going to zoom out a little so I can see all of my data points. Then I'm going to head over to the sketch layer on the right-hand side. And if this layer is not open, then click on the pen icon here. Now, to draw in the lines, I'm going to click on the line tool over here. But before I can start drawing, it would be helpful to check if snapping is on, as this will help us draw the lines in more easily. To do this, click on Sketch Settings at the top of the sketch layer panel. From here, make sure both Enable Snapping is on and Feature to Feature is on. Then make sure your data layer is checked. Now that that's done, click on the X icon on the top right. Now on my map canvas, when I hover over one of my data points, I'll know that I've done this when an orange circle appears like so. From this point, I can now click. Then I will drag my mouse over to the middle point, which again, in this case, is Watford General Hospital. And once the orange circle appears, I will double click to finish drawing this line. I will now repeat this process for all my other data points. If I wanted to now change the style of these lines, such as their colour and thickness, I would click on the Properties panel at the top of my right-hand side menu bar over here. Then check all the lines I've just made and click on Edit. From here, if I scroll down, I can change the name that they appear as in my Properties panel. This will help me later if I draw more lines on this sketch layer. In this case, I'm going to name them Watford Gen, just so I can keep track of them and know that I drew these lines to connect to Watford General Hospital. If I scroll down further, I can change a multitude of things, such as colour, the transparency of the colour, how thick I want the line to be, if I want to include arrowheads on either side of the line, and if I want to change my line from solid to dashed. Once I'm happy with all of these changes, I can click anywhere else on the map canvas to no longer be selecting those lines. Now, if you don't have any count data like we've mentioned previously, for example, like how many people come from each postcode, then congratulations, you can finish the video here. And feel free to play around with colours and style to make your map as aesthetic as you want. I've also linked below one of the tutorials called Print Layout that discusses how to export your map in a way that's more professional than just a screenshot. However, if you do have count data that you want to visualize, here's how you do it. First, head over to the layer that contains your data over on the left-hand side, like so, and click on it. From here, you can click on the styles icon denoted by a multitude of shapes right here. Click on plus field and choose the field that stores your counts. In my case, it's people. And then click on add. If count and amounts size has not been selected for you, make sure that you select it from the list of styles available. You can see on my map right now that the size of the symbols is just a little bit too large. To fix this, click on the styles option over here. Scroll down to size range and bring it down just a little so that the maximum size isn't as big. Personally, I'm quite happy for my map to visually look like this, so I'm going to leave it. But I recommend playing with these parameters so that you can get used to them and you can find what works best for your data and your map. And that's pretty much it. Well done for sticking through and reaching to the end of the video. If you want to go the extra mile and add labels to your data points, I recommend watching one of my previous tutorials named Labeling, which I've also linked in the description below. Anyways, I hope that this has helped clear up the mystery of flow maps for you. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Happy mapping!